This webinar is part of the pre-events of the Forum for the Future of Agriculture. And the Forum for the Future of Agriculture would like to welcome all stakeholder voices in agribusiness. That means that also the agility of small businesses is very much welcomed. Small businesses are innovating to answer the call for sustainable management of natural resources to promote stronger ecosystem services. And their innovations need to be understood, supported, and shared. And I very much hope that you will get inspiration today to understand their viewpoint, their fields of expertise, and that you will be very much inspired today. I'm Marie-Christine Schwimmern. I'm head of the committee of the Young Friends of the Countryside, and we're particularly supporting young rural entrepreneurs. I've been part of the Young Friends for the past 10 years, and I'm very, very excited now to welcome our 4 very exciting speakers. Our 4 speakers will explain to us how they leverage their business cases for ecosystem services in the agricultural and also in the forestry sector. And I think we can now expect 4 very fascinating presentations. They will all very briefly introduce themselves to you, and I'm very, very excited to welcome you. We will start in the order of Matthias Westerwood from Walderland, who I don't think I can see yet, otherwise we will skip it. And then Georg König from Kiebitz, Alexander Wilsmeyer from Treli, and Ivo Degen from Climate Farmers. And I very much hope you'll enjoy the presentations and the discussions. As for questions, don't hesitate to pop them into the chat, and we'll come back to them later in our discussions. For now, very warm welcome. And I would like to start with Georg König from Kiebitz.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Georg. I'm a farmer and forester myself. And roughly a year ago, me and my team, we founded Kiebitz. Yes, and really glad to be here today. I'm also a member of the next 3 days. So in case some of the people in this meeting today are also here in presence, I'm really happy to have a chat afterwards too.
Fantastic. Georg, if you like, you can very much start with presenting Kiebitz for the next 10 minutes.
Okay. Yeah, sure. So yeah, as I just said, I'm Georg. I'm one of the co-founders of Kiebitz, and I am a farmer myself. And being a farmer myself, it's my deepest motivation to make environmental protection a profitable business case for farmers and foresters. And this is also the reason why we founded Kiebitz, because we want to channel private investments into the building up of trustworthy nature capital solutions. Well, as of today, there's a huge funding gap for nature restoration. There's 700 billion euros missing every year in order to rebuild our ecosystems. And we want to tackle this challenge by providing a really easy to use digital infrastructure and providing trustworthy solutions for both the land users, so farmers and foresters on the one hand, and potential investors on the other hand. When we talk about environmental protection, we don't only mean climate change mitigation, even though it's an important part of that, obviously. But at Kiebitz, we really try to embrace complexity, as we are also closing water circles, and we are also rebuilding biodiversity along carbon capture mechanisms. And the measures we implement are well known by many people in our audience. Probably could be flower strips, could be hedges, could be agroforestry systems, could be deadwood in the forest, for instance. So these are all really valuable measures, and this is also the reason why they cost money. As of today, there is governmental funding for some of these measures, but to actually really rebuild our ecosystem, this money would not be enough. And on the other hand, it's really complicated to get access to these fundings. And this is also the reason why we believe the key here lies in private investments into nature capital. And luckily, Also, many companies have understood this point. This is a really recent study from end last year. And 500 really big companies in USA and Europe were asked, well, what's your take on biodiversity? And more than 70% actually said, well, biodiversity loss is a huge problem for our business model. It's a big threat, but only 5% have a strategy so far. So there's a huge gap in acknowledging the problem and in solving the problem. And this is due to a high complexity. No one really understands so far what you need to do in order to improve your ecosystem footprint, how you have to change your value chains and so on. And this is also where we at Keybits believe we can make a great contribution. 70% is a large number, but actually there's 4 main drivers for companies to invest in biodiversity today. One of them obviously is marketing, because consumers are asking them to be more sustainable, maybe climate neutral, but also like sustainable in other terms in the future. Then there's the finance world. I don't know, some people might have noticed that BlackRock, for instance, announced that they will only be investing in sustainable businesses in the future. And this is also true for European banks and funds. Then there's obviously the physical risk. So if value chains are not sustainable, they tend to be more affected by environmental catastrophes. And last but not least, there's also ever more stricter regulation, especially in Europe. This is just a short overview. There's mandatory regulation, there's voluntary regulation, there's national regulation, such as the French article number 29, and there's European regulation. So it's really complicated, but it's getting a bit more strict every year. There's many discussions in the European Parliament, and in many talks to companies, we see that it's still really complicated for businesses, and they don't really know what to do. And obviously, it also depends a lot on the industry they come from, which is why we decided to focus on those industries most closely related to primary production, such as food businesses when it comes to agriculture, and let's say paper industry when it comes to forestry on the other hand. And the product we offer them actually is a kind of a full service. So regarding the companies, we help them to analyze the value chain, to identify their main ingredients, and also to deduct the environmental impact of their main ingredients. We then develop a concept for them in order to improve their ecosystem footprint. We offer these measures that come out of this concept to farmers, and they can actually go on our website, dial in their zip code. I will show that to you in a second, and say, well, I want to implement one of these measures. They can plant them on their field. They can verify the implementation of these measures via our app, and then certify it and being paid for that. So for companies, for instance, you go in that tool, you say, well, my main ingredients are wheat and sugar beet, for instance, if you're a liquor producer, for instance, and then the tool tells you, well, in your region, with that amount of sugar beet, you should be using these measures in order to improve your ecosystem footprint, and calculates a package for you. And obviously the other option would be for companies just to invest in any kind of project. So we are also offering individual projects like tailor-made for a certain region, like let's say the Harz Mountains, for instance, if you want to improve a whole landscape, but also standardized projects like flower strips, agroforestry programs in a certain state of Germany or other regions of Germany, obviously, as well. And for the farmer or forester, it looks like that. You can go on the platform. You see, well, I could implement, let's say this project, for instance, which is protecting small animals in the field. You can say, well, I want to do that. I get 500 euro for that each year. You can plan it on your fields. You can also, I know if there's farmers and foresters here today, upload your shape files from the usual governmental subsidy application. You can implement the measures, and you can monitor them. So we have an app where you can actually prove that you implemented the measure by taking a picture of the flower strip, for instance, and there's a georeference so that so that you can really prove, well, I did that flower strip exactly where I planted in the planting tool, and thus you can prove the implementation. And also we can use these pictures in order to let our, at the moment, manually people identify the biodiversity improvement at a given location. And we also want to use these pictures in the future to train an AI program in order to monitor biodiversity digitally in the future. And then the farmers get paid for the implementation of these measures. And yeah, so we believe it's a really easy to use. That's like our highest goal. It's easy to use for both farmers and foresters. So implementers, land users on the one hand, and companies on the other hand, system to channel private investments into the building up of trustworthy nature capital solutions. And we at Keybits, we want to take over all the necessary, sometimes also complicated steps for both partners, so that we can really help both sides to scale up nature capital and to restore our ecosystems. And we do this in a really diverse team. We are all rooted in either agriculture or forestry, and but still have luckily different skill sets. So Ludwig, for instance, he did his PhD in climate science. I had a job in consulting before, so rather the business perspective. Lucas has really extensive knowledge in practical agriculture and rural development. Stephanie has a lot of knowledge in land use, land system change. So she also started her PhD on that topic, and also on regenerative agriculture. And then there's Sophia, who is a really business focus. She studied at a technical university, so also like the technical part of our solution is covered here. We have an approach where we want to get all stakeholders on board, because we believe we need the land users, we need private industry, but we also need the public sector, because if you think ecosystem improvement, you need to think it on landscape level. So we need all partners who are active in a region to work together. So NGOs and academia are also really important. And this way we believe we can have the highest impact on regions. Yeah. And we have 3 pilot regions so far, each one with different foci. So in Lower Saxony, all of them as of today are in Germany, I have to admit here, is focusing on agriculture and ecosystem improvement. And we have another project focusing on agroforestry and pyrolysis, so also generating biodiversity ecosystem, but also carbon credits there. And then we are planning another project focusing on improvements in forests. And obviously, as we are today here in Brussels and in a ELO or Friends of the Countryside audience, we are really looking forward to further rolling out our pilot projects into other regions in Europe. So yeah, we would be really glad if you can approach us in case you have any need for some kind of digital infrastructure to scale nature capital, nature-based solutions. And yeah, really happy to get in touch with all of you afterwards too. Thank you so far, and really looking forward to questions. I believe there is one already.
Yes, there's one question already. I think it's a very specific one. Maybe Georg, if you can very briefly just answer it before we jump on to the next speaker.
Yes. It's gone again, the question.
The basic, I can read it out. It's how does Keybits raise the funds to pay farmers for their biodiversity improvements?
Yes. So as I showed you this picture with like we analyze the value chain, we tell companies the current ecosystem footprint, blah blah blah, and also calculate or deduct measurements companies need to implement in order to improve their ecosystem footprint. And then we say, well, company XYZ, you have to pay, let's say, 50,000 euro in a certain measure, and we take a commission on that money transferred to farmers and foresters for our service, and the rest goes directly to the farmers and foresters. So it's the companies who pay for that. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. I hope that answered your question. If not, we'll come back to it in the discussion. I think it's a pretty good answer. Thank you very much. I thought it was most interesting. I'm very much looking forward to discussing it as well in a few minutes. And now I think we'll move a bit into the forestry sector with Trelly by Alexander Wilsmeyer. Alexander, the stage is yours. Alexander is particularly looking at how forest owners can get additional revenue by looking at further income sources. And the stage is all yours, Alexander. You have around like 10 minutes, 5 to 7 minutes actually, just to like introduce the audience to your business model.
Thank you very much, Marie-Christine and Georg, for your first presentation. Hello, everyone. My name is Alexander Filsmeyer. I'm a studied forester and I studied forestry and wood science at the University of Natural Resources and Life Sciences, Vienna. And since roughly 1 year, I'm now at Treely. I worked before in the forestry sector at a big forest owner in Austria. And yeah, so I'm very glad to be here and to present to you what we do at Treely. But first, we at Treely, we want to enable European forest owners in their managed forests to do climate protection projects as the rest of the world, actually. We are in business to unlock the full potential of our forests, like ecologically, but as well also emotionally. We want to connect society with the forest more intensively, and we want to have the society also to understand the forests better. And we want to enable sustainable and responsible forest management and to connect them together with the societies and companies to monitorize in the end, the ecosystem services of forest owners. And that we do through data-driven technology and software. So what is Treely in the end? In the end, we are a monitoring, reporting, verification platform where we make say a digital twin of the forests, like with the fast developing technologies. And through this as exact as possible measurement, we want to subsidize for the ecosystem services. Right now we start with CO2 storage, but maybe in the future we can also go into the direction biodiversity as keywords or into water reservoir capacities, etc. And in the second phase, we bring trading partners, companies, enterprises who want to be active in this field together with the forest owners, and we enable them to have premium high quality carbon credits out of Europe, where actually most of the companies are also located. They have a stronger bonding to their climate protection issues they are approaching. So what are there now possibilities to protect to go into climate projects in forests? There is the well-known afforestation afforestation projects, which actually right now up to date, most of the CO2 credits are coming out from. You also have this, from the past, you have the issues about calculation problems, etc., or over calculating the CO2 storage in these projects. There is also, on the other hand, the political discussions about decommission of forests, to not be able to go into the forest in the future again to actually get the very important wood resources out of it. So that's why we need to focus in Europe on managed forests, and there we have three possibilities of climate protection projects. To go into the managed forest is also backed by science, as we see here in the primeval forests. You actually, the carbon in the end is also when the forest is in the dying mode, so to say, all the carbon is getting released in the atmosphere again. And what actually forest management is doing is to always optimize the growth rate in the forests. And so our methodology from Treely is the so-called Silva Consult Forest Carbon Standard. And this standard is based on the international norm 14064-2, which was released in 2019. And in this normative, it's written how to actually develop and validate climate protection projects in general. And the Silver Consult is forest carbon standard is specifically for the European managed forests. Through this international standard, it is possible that organizations which are accredited by the international standard can actually validate then also after such a methodology. And in our case, this is the TÜV North or TÜV Austria or other organizations like DECRA or someone who is allowed by the international standard to validate and certify after their standards. So how does a climate protection progress or project looks like with Treely? We need to go through 5 steps. In the first step, we determine the whole area where the project is going to be performed. And there are the certain key figures, of course, the area, the stock stand, which is on it, the tree species distribution, the growth rates, etc. And right now it's a hybrid between our software tools but also the forest inventory, which is the forest owner is implementing already. And in the second step, we calculate a so-called modeled stock for this area, which is based on science and stock models, growth tables, yield tables, etc. And we are also in close contact with forest authorities here to get for this area where the project will be performed, the optimum stock by science. And then in the third step, the forest owner can commit to one or two project types. This is first the increase of stock, where he goes from a certain level where he is right now to an upper one. And the difference between this is the so-called climate protection amount. And and this growth is only possible between the modeled stock, which we discussed before. And the preservation of stock is also only possible in between the modeled stocks, but the current stock, which mostly in mountainous areas is higher than the modeled stock, the upper boundary. So here he can commit to 30 years. I don't go under this, in this case, 370 cubic meters per hectare. And the difference between the lower boundary of the science and his commitment is in this case also the climate protection amount. So when we have here example calculation for the forest owners, and we are actually here, in this case, we have a total project carbon sink from 130,000 tons of CO2. And then every 30 years, because our projects are always for 30 years, every year, 1/30 of this whole amount is coming onto the market and is credited by the auditor. And from this amount, 10% goes into a risk buffer for calamities, etc. And 25% is our commission, and the rest is for the forest owner. And with this rest, the forest owner can calculate with between 60 to 100 euros per hectare and year as additional income to his current forest management. And of course, this is calculated right now with 35 euros per ton of CO2, but we already in this year are about to sell it for 55 euros. So the basis, the step 4 for this amounts is then the annual verification, which is also again a quality measurement. So the amount is not transferred once to the forest owner and left by himself. No, it's a partnership with the forest owner where we actually monitorize every year and also check every year if he's still in his saving plans here and commitment plans. And this is all done on our project registry, where every ton of CO2 gets a serial number, and then through that the whole process until the last step, the compensation is clearly and 100% transparent, viewable for every stakeholder. And in the fifth step, of course, we need to sell this CO2 tons also. And there we are focusing, like it's a best bidder solution, but we also focus on local and regional buyers. And the most important thing is that the buyer needs to have a CO2 emission plan, and in the best case also a reduction plan, so that actually in the end only hard to avoid emissions are here compensated, and not like business as usual and just compensate the hell. This is not our approach. So we ask them for the emission plan. And in a further step, the forest owner commits by contract that he invests all the income, reinvests all the incomes into his forest. These are all silvicultural measurements, developments, maybe changes into his management plan, but also personal costs and forest technology like machines, etc., for his forest management operations. Yeah. So far, we have 5 projects in Vorarlberg running. They are now audited and certified. We are right now in the selling process. The first CO2 credits are now accredited since last month. And yeah, we are actually approaching out of Austria, but also in our case, we want to enable our business model for whole of Europe. And this is also why we are here at the European Landowners, the Forum for Future of Agriculture. And yeah,
thank you so much. Most interesting. And I think you've already answered one of the questions of our viewers in the chat. I suggest the majority of the questions is quite broad, and they are actually perfectly suited for our discussion. So we postpone it into discussion. And Alexander, if you'd like to have a look at them, I think some of them are quite specific. And the broader ones will definitely take them into the discussion. Now I'm very, very excited to welcome, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, by the way, Ivo from Climate Farmers. And Ivo is an absolute hero when it comes to regenerative agriculture. He's on a mission to scale it. And I would actually say not to scale it in just Europe. I think it's a very scalable model across the world. And Ivo, I'm very excited to welcome you here to listen to what you will tell us about regenerative agriculture, your reporting standards, which you have developed. And yeah, very warm welcome to you, and the platform is all yours.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And great to see the work of Keybits and Freely. Really nice to see so many competent partners in the space. There's been a lot of development in the last couple of years, and it's great to see that we're all getting to the level where we can provide real transparency. As Marie-Christine said, thank you very much for your nice words. With Climate Farmers, we've been working these last 3-4 years on actually not the mission of scaling regenerative agriculture, but to build the infrastructure for scaling. Meaning what we see is that regenerative agriculture is scaling. It is growing. I mean, anybody who has been in this space, has been observing this space for the last couple of years, has seen the immense growth of interest. And we've been part of this space from the beginning, and we're taking a sort of coordinating role. So very early, we went to see the diverse experts, pioneers on the ground working with regenerative agriculture, and realized that they did not know each other. And we were seeing how there was immense interest from the food industry towards regenerative agriculture, which is something that in principle we applaud and we support very much. And we also believe that the movement of regenerative agriculture cannot be led by the food and input industry, but has to be led by the farmers. And so our first action was to organize the first conference for regenerative agriculture, the first European conference for regenerative agriculture, bringing together the diverse stakeholders and experts. And we wrote together with these pioneers, the manifesto for regenerative agriculture in Europe, which was really exciting. This was the first time that the community has come together. Since then, amazing stuff has happened, and this is sort of how we see our role, is to be there to see what is the infrastructure that regenerative agriculture needs in order to scale, but in such a way that it's really true to the core of what regeneration could mean. In the meantime, we have worked very hard on a number of different offerings. We work with farmers on the part of expertise, supporting them, matching them with experts or with peers, which is the bigger request actually that farmers have, to meet other farmers that are on the same journey and that can show them how it looks like in practice. And then on the other side, matching farmers with financing opportunities. And there are different ways we can do that. And basically, I think the two key ones have been presented before, which is financing through the carbon markets, which is an exciting opportunity. It's a big opportunity. It's one that needs to be handled well. So I'm really glad to see Treely is using the approach of a properly audited ISO 14064 methodology. And then on the other hand, we have the option of working with the food industry, which has a large and growing interest in regenerative agriculture. And I quickly share a few points of how we work with this. We've been, looks like my, wait a second, I just have to reshare again. So we've seen a huge development in this space from a couple of, I think 5 years ago, when we first had conversations with some of the large players who were basically laughing at the nice idea of regenerative agriculture, and it sounded a bit like fairies and nice energies. And to today, where it's the absolute accepted norm for the food industry. And the reason is not niceness. The reason is not really even sustainability. The reason is purely economic, and this is really good, and this is really positive. The potential that we have here is to actually save food security and save the food businesses. So if you're a manager in a food corporate today, and you face huge challenges. So let's say you're looking at procurement. There's a great study that came out recently by BCG together with the German NABU, which showed the risk of prices going up. Of course, last year we have seen that due to the Ukraine war. But this is not limited to war situations. This is going to be the norm going forward. We had 2018, a drought in Germany in which yield went down 18% and procurement costs went up 20%. So there's a clear economic value to enhance resilience of production. Of course, for sustainability, there's no question about it. Reporting on biodiversity, reporting on carbon is a requirement, is going to become more of a requirement. And so the food industry needs to be ready for it. And of course, marketing benefits as well. But we are facing massive challenges in regenerative agriculture still. It's amazing to see the huge growth, the huge interest, but it is not so easy. Right now, there's still no widely accepted definition of regenerative agriculture. We see the challenges of setting up regenerative agriculture programs in food supply chains because of the issue of loyalty. We see that currently there's still no end-to-end supply chain transformation service, including on-field transition support for farmers that has really made it work. We are in the early stages of MRV, of monitoring, reporting, and verification, and a lot of the current reporting solutions are not really yet aligned with the new SBTi. We're not so new anymore, SBTi flag framework. I'll skip sort of what makes us special. We've basically worked the last couple of years with hundreds of farms across Europe and developed the first proper carbon credits system in Europe. But the key here is that we have this very large farmer-led community that has originated from the conferences that we've run, that right now has farmer communities of sub-communities, peer-to-peer programs all across Europe, in which there are thousands of parallel agriculture experiments taking place. And we can collect that data and learn from these experiments as they occur. So basically a massive open source research program. Through our carbon credit program, we can, on the one hand, finance the transition, but not only that, we collect proper data that is not only sort of self-reported, but properly monitored, and then building the largest network of agronomists and regenerative agriculture consultants, supporting farmers in the transition, and sort of consolidating what do we know today about regenerative agriculture. This is what we've been building the last couple of years. And this fits perfectly into the solution that we're building now for food corporations, which is on the one hand to help food corporations that have made the massive commitment of transitioning. And again, this is something that we applaud and something that we support. And we also see it as our role to make sure that it is done properly and that it is done in the interest of farmers, first of all, and that is done in the interest of the ecology and the climate. So to ensure that there is zero greenwashing in the space, because the opportunity we have with regenerative agriculture is absolutely incredible, but just as easily we can lose it if we don't do this properly. I'm going to skip the next slide to refer to the point that Marie-Christine made, which is, yes, there is no definition of regenerative agriculture. And personally, I would argue there shouldn't be one. The term definition comes from putting an end to something, to define. And this is not really what we want to do with regenerative agriculture. But what there should be is a reporting standard. So what basically anyone that has worked in regenerative agriculture long enough agrees on is that regenerative agriculture differentiates itself also from, for example, organic agriculture, right? The differentiation we have in conventional and organic is on the input side. What do we put into agriculture? Regenerative agriculture does not stand next to conventional and organic, and it's sort of a third system, but it's a different way of looking at it. It's about the output. It's not about the input, it's about the output, or rather about the outcomes. So basically, the question is what comes out of the system? And regenerative agriculture is outcome-based. So we know that regeneration takes place if we can observe regeneration taking place on three spheres: on the ecological, on the economic, and on the social level. All of these are regeneration, and you will not have, for example, ecological regeneration if you do not have economic regeneration. Complex topic. When we talk about a reporting standard, basically what we propose is there should not be any talk about regeneration unless a very simple system is accepted, which is we need to report on our baseline. That is, where do we start in terms of our ecology? We need to report on our benchmark. What do we aim for? What do we consider a good value in this system? And then report on the progress towards that, following a transparent methodology. So 4 simple points, very complex in practice, but simple to say. Baseline, benchmark, progress, and methodology. And if we have that, we can have a conversation about regeneration. Unless you have that, everything that is being done in the name of regeneration has to be considered greenwashing. And this is a very simple, basic basic reporting standard, anti-greenwashing system that we are working out together with our partners of the Savory Institute and a number of the other really grassroots actors in the regenerative agriculture space as a conversation starter. This is something that everybody that is serious should be able to get behind. Loads more to tell, but time is short, so I'll hand it back to Marie-Christine.
Thank you so much. Really, really interesting. And as you can see, the chat is exploding with questions. A lot of them are also directed at carbon credit generation, and a few ones, I think one direct one is actually directed at you, Ivo. If you like, maybe you can answer this one before we jump into the general discussion. And it says some skeptics believe that the yields from regenerative agriculture are lower and that hence the business model is not sustainable unless there's a subsidy. And that kind of plays into our first question for the discussion, is like, what are your expectations towards business policies? and what kind of role do businesses, do subsidies play there? And I think that's also the question for Trilly and also for Kibitz. And Ivo, if you like, you can start, as the question was first directed at you.
Very happy to. Let's see if I find the data. I have it somewhere, but for now I'll just say it. Yes, there are people who believe that, but it's not enough to believe things. We actually need to prove things. So for a long time we believed that the yield from regenerative agriculture, that is the production yield, is higher. Other people believe they are lower, but the good thing is that now we have the data coming in, and the data shows that it is actually close to equal, in some cases higher. So in animal production, we are talking about higher yield. In most other agricultural production, we are talking about equal yield, which is a very, very interesting data that we have there. Because to say we have equal yield to conventional agriculture, which has massive amounts of input costs, and in regenerative agriculture, we're talking about close to zero input costs, is extremely, extremely interesting. So when we're talking about yield, we're talking about very close to the same yield, if not higher, point one. But your actual question is about the business model. And the business model and yield are two independent systems. We have incredibly high yield in conventional agriculture. We still have a terrible business model that can only survive on subsidies. So what we need to be talking about is profitability of the business. And if we're talking about profitability of the business, then there is no question that regenerative agriculture is the better option. So what we consistently see is that farmers who work with regenerative agriculture can raise their profits, even if the yields are lower. But again, in practice, the yields are not actually lower. So this is really, really important. When it comes to Marie-Christine's question, what do we expect from policy? We are working a lot on the policy space, and we see our role as representing the grassroots movement of regenerative farmers in Europe. And we are working hard on bringing together the diverse stakeholders in Europe that are working with the farmers into an entity that can represent these voices in these discussions. So if you're interested in that, then also please reach out. The request is simple, which is outcome-based payments. So we need to pay farmers for the contributions to ecosystem services that they bring. It's not new. We all know this already, but it's becoming more and more practical. Meaning, carbon, we all know about this. We know that the EU is working on a certification framework. It's based on or it's going to be based on the ISO 14064, I'm sure. And sooner or later, this payments for carbon are going to be included in public payments if everything goes well. We have a soil health law coming up. We are working very hard on making sure that this soil health law includes concrete indicators for soil health, which can actually be paid for. We're talking about water as one of the most important climate, both sort of effects, but also issues we have with climate. Also, the infiltration, the retention, and the purification of water should be paid for. All of this can be measured relatively cheaply, and we are proving that in the private markets. Treaty is proving this, Kibitz is proving this, Climate Farmers is proving this, so many other actors are proving that it can be done. So the argument up until now has long been, we can't do it. Well, now we know we can do it. So there isn't a big reason not to do it. So very simply, request to policymakers, let's pay farmers for the outcomes, not subsidies. Let's pay them for services. There's a big difference in how we're going to be perceiving the role of farmers in society.
Thanks so much. I think it was a very interesting statement, and I think Georg, you already posted something into the chat regarding that. Maybe I'd like you to be the next one. What do you actually think of that? Whether farmers should be paid for that?
Yeah, I can totally agree with everything Ivo said, basically. So I believe it's really, I mean, like being a farmer myself, my brother is a farmer in Brandenburg, I'm a farmer in Western Germany. Obviously, there is big differences in how regenerative agriculture is implying a farm, depending on soil, climate, blah, blah, blah. So if you go into this BCG NABU study, you will see a potential increase of 60% of your profits. This will obviously depend on many factors, but still, I mean, what this system does is putting the farmer in the center of attention. So as of today, especially conventional farmers, we buy fertilizers, we buy pesticides and so on, and we sell our end product to some mills, and they proceed it further and further and further. And what regenerative agriculture does, it's putting value creation back to the farms, as you don't need to buy so much fertilizers anymore, and you, yeah, it's like putting the farmer at the center of attention. That also goes back to what Ivo stressed, implies that the services that farmers and foresters produce are not only the let's say ton of wheat or square meter, how do you say, cubic meter of wood. It's just, if you acknowledge all the ecosystem services that come along with proper management of land, there's a lot more that farmers and foresters produce, and that also deserves a value and being paid for that. So yeah, I believe that's the most important point here. And I mean, we at Kibitz, so we started like 1.5 years ago as like an association, like on voluntary basis, and our aim was to build a platform in order to make all the governmental funding that is out there more accessible for farmers and foresters. So like just taking the public money that is already existing and making it yeah, easy to apply for governmental funding. But Ivo also said, like the structure of governmental funding is not in line what we need today in order to scale ecosystem services and to build up nature capital, because it's always looking at the status quo, and then you do like really little adjustments somewhere and get a fixed amount for that. I mean, there's many policy reasons for that since since the foundation of the European Union, and we have many agreements with other partners around the globe that lead to this rather difficult and inefficient system. But still, it's not sufficient, and it doesn't serve anyone in order to restore our ecosystems. And luckily, I mean, like for the next CAP, as far as I know, there is result-based schemes planned. So that like there's also governmental bodies working on that. There's in Germany, there's the DLG, the German Agricultural Society. In Austria, even Alex, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe even in this CAP period, there's already some outcome-based payments involved. And that obviously will be the future, as I mean, if you're a farmer, all you do is optimizing your fields to get the highest yield in terms of tons per hectare so far. And if you switch that and you enable farmers and foresters to get the highest yield in terms of, let's say, tons, but also biodiversity, CO2, blah, 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 you trigger all that innovation potential of individual farmers and leverage it in order to get the maximum output. And you can't achieve that by just assigning random numbers of euros to hectares in, I don't know, Lower Saxony and Brandenburg.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense. And Alexander, what do you think? I mean, you're in the forestry sector. Do you also think, like Georg, that it is a hugely bureaucratic process? And do you also see improvements in the forestry sector when it comes to policy supporting foresters? What are your expectations towards those policies?
Yeah, like, I mean, of course, there are also like subsidies. Like, there is also one question about this. Is it possible to combine subsidies, public funding with afforestation, with the project? Yeah, there are subsidies already, which are like, for at least in Austria, for many forest owners, they need to do a lot of paperwork to get in the end to some payments for their area. And yeah, but still, like, to connect here the power of innovation and yeah, also the economy, to connect this with the forest owners is, in my opinion, and in opinion of Treely, very, very important. And to come back to the question, yes, it is possible to get public funding for etc. Climate adapted tree species, or I don't know, very soil protecting management, possibly management processes, etc., together with our project. Yeah, so the limit is that you can only have one CO2 climate protection project, of course, on your area, and this you do with, in this case, us. But the rest, to have yeah, subsidies for new roads or better machinery or whatever, this can, of course, also in the future be done. Yeah.
Thank you very much. That was very, very interesting. I think a lot of questions in the chat are actually addressing carbon credits. I think that's a very, very interesting point, and I think all you three are very much involved in that. Ivo, I think you mentioned you already developed your own carbon credits, so you are kind of have a quantification method in the background. And I think lots of questions address, of first of all, like, does it follow, like, carbon credit generation, does it follow a standard? And then also, what is the current price and support needed? And I think all of you, you're also very much involved in that field. And I think it would be very, very cool to hear your different opinions and voices on that. And maybe, Ivo, if you'd like to start, and then we'll have we'll tackle all those individual questions, I think, with that view.
Yeah, very happy to, and can again very, very strongly support the comment of Georg of Kibitz before, of the NABU study. Again, maybe we can post it also in the chat for the general public. So yes, the system that we have follows the ISO 14064, the same one that Treely uses. And this is the international standard that carbon credits should sort of part of the international norm, to be precise. Then you have so-called standards, which are the typical ones that are mentioned are Vera or Gold Standard. I really appreciate their work. They are extremely important trailblazers in this space, and their agricultural systems are not yet ready for implementation. So if you look at the methodologies that have been developed by the large standard, which would be the go-to partners, they are so complex that they can hardly be implemented right now. And so this is why we have chosen not to go with them, but to develop our own system. There's definitely a lot to be said, both in favor and against such standards. However, in order to make it work for our farmers, and in order to be able to provide them the biggest part of the margin, we have chosen not to go with one of these large standards, but instead, same as Treely, work with the standards, develop our own methodology, have an external auditor test it, register the certificates on a registry. So following the sort of established way of creating carbon credits. There is going to be a lot of development in this space in the coming month and hopefully in the coming years. And I'm expecting that the large standards are going to catch up, and I'm really looking forward to this. The issue we have in this space is the fact that carbon credits have been developed rather for the global south. And we're talking about systems in which labor is relatively cheap, and in which carbon projects are relatively large. In Europe, the average farm is 16.5 hectares. So it is extremely costly to use these approaches so we have to rethink it without compromising the approach. On the question of the prices, so we sell, to my knowledge, at the highest price point of 50 to 55 euros per ton of carbon. on the European agricultural market right now. It is a low price. It should be higher. We know that the cost of carbon is somewhere at 185 euro per ton, probably significantly higher than that. In the end, it is infinite if we're destroying everything. So it should be significantly higher. It should also be higher to incentivize farmers, especially small-scale farmers. So if you have a large enough farm, it sort of, you know, evens out, and it comes out at a sum that really makes it worth it. If we're talking about a farm that is smaller than 50 hectares, honestly, right now, it mostly doesn't make sense. You would have to be extremely effective at capturing carbon at such a small scale. And so the prices have to go up. There's a couple of ways in which we can do this. One of them, I think Kibitz is doing a great job at, is paying for biodiversity. So not paying only for carbon, but paying for the whole range of ecosystem services. For that, we need a market to develop in this space. So we still need to do some work. And very importantly, we need to work with the permanence issue around nature-based solutions. Nature-based solutions inherently have a permanence issue. And so there's an issue bringing the price down. So there's a couple of things to balance out.
Thank you so much. That was most interesting. And Georg, I can tell you would like to jump on the discussion.
Yeah.
So yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, as Ivo also pointed out, so like for especially all the other services besides CO2, there is no fixed standard so far, and it's also like more difficult to measure stuff there, because like for biodiversity, there's basically two approaches you can go. One is like measure based, so you say, well, a flower strip in Germany always has a certain ecosystem value, but neglecting regional differentiations, climate, blah blah blah, and then you can try to monitor outcome-based ecosystem services by using, let's say, eDNA is one possibility, satellite images, sending people to the field, making notes. And obviously, in the long term, the result-based system is a goal, or let's say in the medium term. To make a start, I believe like the measure-based systems might be let's say it's okay to make a start with, but there's also big differentiations here. So some companies, for instance, they just assign the same value for each measure anywhere in Europe, and that doesn't make any sense. So you need to have like a good balance between how deep you want to go into detail and how practical the technology has to be. And for biodiversity and all the other ecosystem services, talking about standards, there is no standard so far. I mean, there's many people working on that on United Nations level, on European Union level. And we also are in many working groups around this topic. We are in touch with academia and NGOs. And we decided until there is a common standard, which is also accepted by government bodies and so on, we are cooperating with NGOs such as NABU or WWF or anyone else, in order to ensure that all our measures are trustworthy and credible. And which is really important for both the land users, because being a land user in Europe, you often have to, you often talk to NGOs in your local area as well, let's say NABU, Nature Conservancy Fund in Germany. And if you then can say, well, all I do here is scientifically based, and even some of your own people have agreed that it makes sense and there's a positive nature effect, that's way stronger for the land users, besides the money they earn with ecosystem services, but in their own argumentation. And obviously also towards food companies and other people, as long as there is no standard for biodiversity, which is accepted by the government, you need something else. And I believe scientific standards in Germany, there's Thun Institute, Judith Kühn Institute, ZALF, and so on. And also NGOs are the best alternative to governmental standards so far. Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah, thanks so much. And Alexander, I think you also have you follow a specific quantification method, and you also received a couple of questions on that. So it would be very cool if you could also provide an insight into the forestry aspect next to agriculture.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump to one statement which mentioned before, like the differentiation between the global south and where actually right now all the credits are coming from, and Europe. So really, like Also, when you hear some media reporting about that, which right now reported about the Vera standard, who calculated something wrong, it's very, very important also for society to differentiate between rainforests and subtropical forests to European temperate and boreal forests. So also in kinds of sizes of forest owners, you have 50 million forest owners in Europe owning between 1 and 5 hectares of forests. So you need to have standards for these kind of situations. And so I'm jumping also, I saw one question about the issue of double counting, which was very, very for long term. It, like also the German government said, no, it's impossible to make any climate protection project in Germany because everything is state owned. There's right now a study also from the Waldklimastandard, which actually, and is proved by 2 law firms, which says that this statement is wrong. The forest owner can, of course, as soon as the CO2 is stored into the wood, into C, in solid wood, in this case, this amount owns to the owner of the land where the tree stands. So yeah, this is also like what we are doing now in our methodology. And for so-called verified emission reductions, it is the case that as soon or as long as the climate protection project and the buyer of the climate of the ton of CO2 out of this project is in the same country, no balance between the countries is interfered. Yeah, so every country counts its CO2 amount on the LULUCF framework, and there they combine or compare also between the countries. And in order not to interfere with such schemes, and this is also what we wish from policy to make here, to implement or to get final decisions how they want to implement the Paris Agreement into this new CO2 markets, and to make here a clear statement where we can also, for example, from the European Union, to make this a European-wide approach and not only Austrian forest projects for Austrian companies, because of course America is doing it again in America, and this is of course a much bigger scale. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, very, very interesting. So I think we're almost reaching the end of our discussion, sadly. I hope we managed to somehow at least brush the majority of the questions. I do have a final question for all 3 of you, which is, do you have a specific message to share with our audience? We've been quite specific, which I think was very, very interesting. But do you have one final message you would like to leave with the audience? And maybe we'll start in the same way we started. So Georg, if you'd like to come first and share your specific message for the audience before we all part our ways for the Forum for the Future of Agriculture.
Yeah, I believe like the transformation of our food systems and forestry systems is a huge task, and we need everyone to take part in it in all regions of Europe and also above. And yeah, in case anyone, as I said in my pitch also, of you is planning to do any kind of regional pilot projects or even further where there's capital givers and land users involved, and you need some kind of digital infrastructure in order to develop that further, please come to us, approach us, and we are really happy to further improve our system, try it out, and to bring it to other parts of Europe as well. Yeah.
Thank you. Alexander, what would you like to share with us?
I also wanted to say, like, there are still questions popping in here. Like, I just wanted to say, everyone who, like, where I didn't answer the question yet, please just write an email to alexander@tree.ly, and I will answer the questions after that as well. Of course, as I said, yeah, we also need to transform, like, the forest owners are really doing good stuff already. Of course, they can also, with scientific developments, they can maybe in future do even better, but they need to have, except of their wood selling incomes, they need to have additional incomes as well to be able to fulfill the whole functions which forests need to provide to us. to be able to fulfill this in the future as well. And this is why we need to connect the society, companies, but also individuals with the forest owning, with the forest sector. Yeah, this is super important.
I couldn't agree more to building bridges between society and nature. I think that's the main message as well. Ivo, what is your final take?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the discussion and really love the points, and great to see you again, Georg. Great to meet you. Sorry if I missed your name, to be honest. From Treely, can you remind me?
Alexander.
Alexander, thank you so much. Yes, fully agree with building bridges between nature and humans. I think this is the key sort of vision of Climate Farmers, to a society where we can have both, right? Right now it's like where humans are, nature is not; where nature is, humans are not, and this is not sustainable in the way we want to move forward. So this is the key, and I think the way to go there is reporting standards, very boringly.
Yeah, very.
And proper auditing and all of that. The way to build our deep connection with nature is auditing and proper reporting. It's beautiful that there's so much interest in regenerative agriculture. Let's not waste that opportunity. So basically, my big request is, yes, let's all go forward to regenerative agriculture. Let's use that term responsibly. And there's basically three. I mean, there's a lot of questions around regeneration, what it is, how we understand it, and there's a deep philosophical discussion going on in the background, and I absolutely love it, and I'm fascinated by it, and we need to move forward very practically. Three key understandings that we have about regeneration is, one, it happens in context. Regeneration does never happen without context, which is why carbon credits are not regenerative. Carbon credits say put as much carbon in there as you possibly can. It does not say put the appropriate amount of carbon in there. So look at context, what is appropriate here. Second, it has outcomes. Third, it happens cyclically. Whatever you make of it, act responsibly when it comes to regeneration.
Thank you so much. I actually think that is a very good closing message. Let's not waste that opportunity. I think our free startups have shown they're not wasting that opportunity at all. If you have any questions at them, we will share a summary of our meeting, of our webinar, and we'll do a summary article available on the website. We'll also share, so if you ever have questions, don't hesitate to approach them. I'm pretty sure they will be happy to answer your questions. And thank you so much for all of you for joining us. I hope you got inspired. I hope you enjoyed our talk immensely. I also hope we managed to address some of your questions. And also a big thank you to Georg, to Alexander, and to Ivo for joining us today. It's been a huge pleasure talking to you, and I hope to see you very soon again. And to also hear where you are next time, having innovated even more, I'm pretty sure. So I'm pretty sure we'll hear lots more from them in the future. Thank you very much. This is the ending of our conference. And I'm very happy I hope you're all joining the forum for the future of agriculture tomorrow, and to also the majority will probably see each other tomorrow. Thank you very much and have a lovely day.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.